Hi, my name is Gabrielle Glancy, and I'm the founder and director of New Vision Learning, which, as I always say, is really just a fancy name for a private practice in which I help students get into the colleges of their choice. People often ask me, and I wanted to respond with a little clip explaining what I do, what makes my method different from those that other people use and that students are learning in school. And I would answer that well, some of it is the rapport that I establish with students helps me to get pretty deeply inside their process and themselves so that I have a very good sense of who they are and what they're trying to express. And I think that's central, certainly in the way that I work with students. But I think maybe more importantly even, is the actual process that I go through in helping students write their college essays. I would say the most important factor in this process has to do with after they come up with initial moments in their lives that have been significant to them. Sometimes that takes a little bit of work, but we do that, is to have them free write. Now, they've heard this term before, but they really have no idea what free writing is. So I have them write everything they can possibly think of relating to the subject that we're writing about. And usually this involves maybe a 10-minute period of time that's kind of stream of consciousness. I tell them don't worry about writing in paragraphs. The only requirement I have is full sentences, and I do ask them to write in full sentences. But don't worry about paragraphs, no grammar, punctuation, I'm not concerned. And just write, and let's see what you have. So this is the first step. Even that, which seems like it's free and open, sounds like it should be very easy, but students struggle with it, I think partly because they've never really been trained in letting go. In fact, quite the opposite. They've been trained in writing 5-paragraph essays in a very structured format. And these analytical essays have been ingrained in their minds, and they have a lot of trouble breaking away. So there's sort of a period of unlearning that happens first, in which I help them free themselves from those restrictions. And then after, and the big question is always, well, what do you do once they've free written? And my motto, people like to quote me, and I like to say, you need to get lost in order to get found. So what does that mean? That means that there may be a subject, Richard Hugo calls it the triggering subject, that started your thought process, the start of the thought process of the student. And then in the process of writing, something else has taken over, and the student suddenly is writing about rain. And I say, well, rain? Well, what about that? You started off writing about, the trophy you won in Taekwondo. And he said, yeah, but that day that we won the trophy, there was this huge rainstorm, and the streets were completely flooded, which reminded me when I was visiting my grandparents in Florida. This same thing happened. There was a hurricane, and my granddad, who was in the hospital, we went to visit him there, and actually they evacuated people from that hospital, and it was very scary. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. Okay, keep going. And the kid ends up writing that was the last time he saw his grandfather, and the associations that he has between weather and losing his grandfather, which then led to a bigger subject of well, two things. One, the things you can't control, and secondly, climate change. So, sometimes you start out writing about Taekwondo and you end up writing about climate change. And how would you know that to begin with? Well, you wouldn't know it to begin with. That's the beauty of the process. So I would say that's partly what distinguishes my work with students from everyone else's. I think the other thing is that once I see what they've written, that's the moment to really listen closely. It's the questions that I ask about, well, why did you think about the rain? Well, that reminds me of, well, what does that remind you of? Or what happened then? I think that leads the student to find his or her own deepest well springs, basically. So that's what I would say in terms of the free write process. And of course, there's other steps, and we could talk about them on another day.